Get Rich Education is brought to you by Norada Real Estate and Highlands Residential Mortgage.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Welcome to Get Rich Education, episode 137. Hi, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and I'm back to help you build your wealth with listeners in 182 nations now, from Argentina to Armenia to Aruba. Wow. Thanks for being here, but you're not here for me, you're here for you. Today we have a different kind of show. How so? Because we're talking to a police officer. Why are we talking to a police officer on a wealth building show? Well, because for the first time, we're talking to an everyday Get Rich Education listener just like you. And you know what? This listener and I have never met before. We've never talked before this here today, so we'll see what happens. Now, on the show, we've had a lot of professional investors and thought leaders and polished speakers, and even the number one selling finance author of all time on the show here. So keep in mind that today's guest is not a professional speaker, probably, as far as I know. I guess he could be, and maybe I'll be surprised to find out that he is. Get Rich Education has been on the air more than 2.5 years now, and I know that it's changed quite a few lives by this point, so it's time to hear your story. I want to have an everyday listener come on, probably again after this, and tell me what impacts GRE has had on your life. So as you listen to the story with today's listener and guest, think about if you would like to come on to GRE with me, if you've got something that you want to share and relate about how your experience can help out other listeners. About all that I know of today's guest is that his name is Eric Pratt. He's an Anchorage, Alaska police officer. He's in his 40s, and I know that he's acted on some turnkey properties because my right-hand man and business developer here at Get Rich Education, John Collins, told me so. Today's guest learned about the show word of mouth through John Collins, and that's about all I know. I'm going to ask today's guest exactly how much passive income, how many dollars per month he's generated from buying turnkey properties through the providers at GREturnkey.com. I'm back in my hometown of Anchorage, Alaska today, this city of 300,000 people, after spending a few weeks in Pennsylvania and New York. Wherever you are, let's meet today's guest together. I'd like to welcome on to Get Rich Education today, Get Rich Education listener, Eric Pratt.
Hello, good afternoon, Keith.
So, Eric, this is the first time that we're ever talking. In fact, we've never met each other in person, even though we do happen to live in the same sprawling city of Anchorage, Alaska. And you learned about Get Rich Education, I understand, through John Collins. And yeah, I just want to know what you think when you were given a recommendation to try out listening to Get Rich Education. You know, I imagine you probably put a lot of stock in just knowing that our lead business developer, whom is also my best friend, John Collins, he's just a quality guy with a lot of integrity, and he's a giver. But sometimes the name Get Rich Education, maybe that throws people off. They think it's Get Rich Quick or something like that, and that's not what it's about. So just tell us about how you learned about the show and what you thought about it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Keith. It was roughly 2.5 years ago, and I did have an opportunity to meet John. I actually met him at a going-away party. We had this wonderful conversation, and I was drawn to the guy right off the bat, and we had a lot of good things to talk about. Some months later, he actually contacted me and said, hey, let's go grab a burger. And we met up, and we were brainstorming and talking a little bit, and he was telling me that he was involved with you in this thing called a podcast. Of course, my first response was, wow, that sounds great. What's a podcast? I wasn't familiar with him and never heard of a podcast. And he began kind of telling me about it. And I thought, that sounds really fantastic. And I think you had done about 4 podcasts at that time. So it was pretty early on. So, after I had this great conversation with John, and I went home, and I'm pretty sure he actually showed me on my phone where I could download or find podcasts. That's how new I was to the concept. So I went home and, I pulled up the Get Rich Education podcast, and the first thing that I saw was something about, I think it was number 4. I think it was stocks versus real estate.
Yeah.
And I had actually been a stockbroker for a couple of years, some time ago. And that was something that intrigued me very much. So I listened to the podcast. And to be honest with you, when I first turned it on, podcast, it's produced here locally. I was kind of expecting to hear Wayne and Garth doing a little public access from Mom's basement. And that was kind of my expectation. And right off the bat, I was blown away by professional production quality and the content. I was like, wow, that was pretty darn good. So I don't even think I made it through the night before I listened to the previous 3. And number 1 was, mindset.
Yeah.
And abundant mindset, and followed by how money follows you and being debt-free versus being financially free. I was hooked right off the bat, and I found myself on a weekly basis anxious to hear what was coming next. And Keith, I grew up in a financial family, if I could say that. My dad was a hard-charging, young up-and-coming banker. My stepmom, who raised me, was an accountant. We had financial conversations at the house. Pretty regular. My dad was a bank president who started his own bank at 35 years old, and he was kind of a type A, hard-charging kind of guy. So even back in 5th and 6th grade, so that was late Carter era, inflation, high interest rates. So, and my dad and I were having those kind of conversations back then. So I kind of grew up talking about money and finance and investing. I bought my first stock when I was 12. So there was some kind of background there. And we talk about those things in my family, and we've always have.
So you had a lot of numbers flying around the dinner table conversation when you grew up. I think most listeners are really somewhat immersed, or I guess at least influenced by what I'll call the consumer credit world. Thinking back to episodes 1 and 2, since they were so mindset shifting compared to the other ones, yeah, that must have been a real paradigm shift for you, a real breakthrough, or it must have just boggled your mind a little bit.
It did a little bit, and it was one of those things that I have thought about before. But that did have a real impact on me, and it was stuff that I had thought about before, but it was explained and put together very well, even just in your very first episode on Get Rich Education, Keith, and that was kind of what hooked me in.
How many of the episodes have you listened to?
I'm not sure I've missed any of them. I'd have to go back and see if there's any that I missed, but I don't think I have. When I travel, if I've missed some, I normally load them onto my iPad and pick them up later. But one of the first things I check on Friday mornings is to see what the episode is. If it's something that I've been thinking about, I'll jump on it right first thing on Friday morning. And if not, it's something that I'll pick up maybe a little bit later. But I don't think I've missed an episode, Keith.
Well, we're going to play the episode with you shortly, and I'm sure you won't miss that one.
I don't know. We'll see what that experience is like.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure that, after I've been on, you'll want to get back in touch with Tom Hopkins and Garrett Sutton and Tom Wheelwright and Ken McElroy. I'm sure these people will be ecstatic to hear that they can now say they've been on the same podcast.
Well, I'm pretty lucky to have a great network of guys like that, and now you're part of it. You're in the same sentence. So obviously you, I guess, put a lot of credence or some value in what you heard because you did go on to act. So before you tell us about the action that you've taken and turnkey properties that you told me right before we came on the air that you bought here, Eric, just go ahead and tell us about yourself before we talk more about properties and any potential action taking. How did you earn your income before you started investing in real estate?
Well, I was a stockbroker for about 2 years. I've been an Anchorage police officer for almost 20 years now, Keith, and that's been great for me. Again, if you have a short attention span, there's different things happening all the time. Certainly not for everybody, but it's been good for me, and it's some work that I've gotten some satisfaction out of. But everybody needs a side hustle. Everybody needs, multiple streams of income. And I've always kind of had a passion for investing and looking at what the financially successful people in the world have done. It's just something I've had an interest in. I have owned properties in the past. Let's see, the first property I actually purchased myself, my wife and I, specifically for an investment was in 2001. And that was in Las Vegas, Nevada, like everybody else was buying homes in Las Vegas, Nevada at the time.
Right.
And I had considered that market for a couple of years prior to that. And I certainly wasn't familiar with the concept. I'm not even sure it existed in the industry of, turnkey investing. So that wasn't there. So it involved me taking a number of trips down there, learning the area, finding the right real estate agent, finding the right homes, and then putting together my own team. I had to find who I'm going to finance with. I had to find who the management company was going to be. And it was pretty labor intensive to put all those pieces together, and eventually pulled the trigger, which happened, that would have been 2001. That market was kind of working at hyperspeed at that point in time, rapid appreciations and some interesting things happening in that market. And, certainly by about 2005, what I had paid 160 for was pushing 325, 330. So all of a sudden I had a lot of my nest egg kind of tied up in one little house in a market far away.
Yeah, those were exactly those high-flying appreciation days, especially in Vegas.
Absolutely. It was a crazy time. And I had kind of a unique resource in my father in that we talked all the time. And I was telling him, for the record, he thought I was absolutely crazy when I bought that property down there. He thought I'd lost my mind. And he might have been right, but when I bought it, it was purely an appreciation play. I knew that's what it was. I didn't cash flow. In fact, after management, I was about a negative $100 a month. And, I'm a pretty darn conservative guy, and $100 a month at that time, gosh, that ate at me. I was like, $100 a month. But at least I had the appreciation that kept me from going to the dark place. I owned that property until 2005. And I was talking to my dad, and I said, Pop, I've been watching the news. These prices have appreciated so much. And I just watched a bit on the news talking about the number of people that are financing homes in Las Vegas on interest onlys and negative amortization loans. It was astronomical. You couple that with the fact that the number of people that bought them purely for speculation or investment was, not owner occupied anyway, was a big portion of the people buying homes. And I thought, wow, that's just not sustainable. And you throw in the fact that I bought that technically as a second home back then. So the people that were buying it as an investment like me weren't even included in those huge number of people that were buying them purely as speculation. So after a little conversation with my dad, that's just not a sustainable market. And you were starting to hear those kind of things on financial news, and just got uncomfortable to me. So in June or July of 2005, I made a call to the real estate agent down there in Vegas, and I said, we need to sell this house. And he called me back hours later, said, hey, it's sold. We got her done. I was happy to have my appreciation. I got out of that house. I had just a rough familiarization with the 1031 exchange at that point in time. Didn't know it was called a 1031 exchange, but I knew that concept existed. I wasn't quite comfortable with where I should invest at that time, what else I should do with that money. I was afraid of the real estate market kind of nationally at that point in time. So I ended up not doing anything, which kind of bummed me out, and I had to pay the tax man. So that was a little harsh.
You sure did take in a nice capital gain there. So you did decide to pay the tax.
I did pay the tax. I mean, it's hard to complain when you have a good win like that one, but doggone it, that there was a mechanism to not have to do that. And I had been researching some other markets, which strangely, not knowing a whole lot. And in 2005, it didn't feel like there were certainly the same kind of resources on the internet that we have now. So I was researching some markets, and I kept coming back to Texas. It was a market that hadn't rapidly appreciated like these other markets I was looking at. And I thought, gosh, a guy probably can't get hurt too bad if I rolled some of this money into Texas. But I just didn't quite get it all put together. I didn't take in a trip down there for maybe what wouldn't pan out. And it was something I didn't do. So, of course, in retrospect, there's some kicking myself. But gosh, looking back, retrospect, it's sure easy to make good decisions.
Yeah, it always is, the whole hindsight 2020. Well, I've got to say, I think you showed a remarkable amount of initiative and maybe even daring to go ahead and invest out of state really without a turnkey system. Of course, it can be done, but it's just like you're saying, you have to go ahead and put all the ingredients together yourself, and you need to make your own recipe and then go try to find those ingredients to go ahead and build that recipe, whereas it is already done for you with turnkey real estate investing. So it sounds like listening to Get Rich Education and introducing the concept of turnkey to you, which probably only did have its advent about 15 years ago, but the introduction of that was a major, major way to collapse timeframes for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I got to say that I think it was episode 9 of this podcast Keith, you did a cash flow piece on Memphis, and that was where I really, first time I think I heard the turnkey investing as it relates to single family homes or investment properties. After that podcast, it really piqued my interest. I had several months of telling myself, gosh, that's too good to be true. It can't be the case. What am I missing? How am I going to get snowed on this one?
Right.
So I did what little research I could and kept coming back to it. And I thought, doggone it, I need to see what that is all about. And in fact, I bought my first little house there in Memphis. When did I close on that thing? It's been a couple of years ago now. 2015, I think, is when I actually closed.
Okay, so you were an action taker relatively early on there. Yeah, with turnkey real estate investing, sometimes people think, oh, that's too good to be true. You get paid 5 ways at the same time, and you as the investor have the ability to buy a property already tenanted, already completely renovated, already under competent management, and cash flowing typically from day one. That sounds too good to be true. Why would somebody sell me a property in that condition? And then you learn later on, oh, well, the turnkey company, it's a win-win. The turnkey company makes out because part of their business model is they make money on the renovation. They're basically fix and flippers, and they're fix and flippers in investor advantage markets, and we go ahead and buy their fix and flip. But also, and some people don't realize this, a turnkey provider also gets to hold the property for cash flow. So they have a second income stream. It's not just the appreciation that they get on the fix and flip. They hold it for a stream of cash flow, management cash flow, because they hold it in their management portfolio while we hold it for cash flow. And the tenant also wins because they get a renovated, adequately managed place to live. So it's really a win for everybody. But yeah, it does take a little bit of thinking, wait a second, is this too good to be true?
And I got to tell you that the experience that I've had has been phenomenal. And in fact, I just finally made my first trip down to Memphis to meet the team down there and to look at some of these properties just a month or so ago.
Oh, great.
And it was everything I thought it was and more. I was blown away. It was fantastic. So I couldn't be happier with the properties that I have. I'm doing all I can to acquire more. And I've made several references, including to my father, who's bought a number of properties down there, and a neighbor, and I've got a couple other friends that are on the list. And every one of them, when I first told them the story, they're like, yeah, wait a minute, that's too good to be true. After making the trip down there, it'd be hard-pressed to get any better than that. I've been very, very satisfied. I love the properties, I love the team, and I can't say enough good about it. And that all started with, hearing, I think it was episode 9. I had another property up here that I bought in 2011. It had a duplex here in Anchorage. And interestingly, my wife and I, we had done a little bit of traveling, and we had decided that I was going to try to take a leave of absence from my job. I was going to try to be gone for a year, and I wanted to be out of the country for like the 2012, 2013 school year. And up until that point, I had been diligent investor as far as the deferred comp and 401k. I was all in on the life deferment plan, and to include IRAs on top of that. We were putting away as much as we possibly could, and definitely had an effect on cash flow as far as the family goes. And so when we thought about what would it take for us to be able to leave the country with our daughter, who would have been in 7th grade at that time, and go away, spend a year, have that time together as a family, have that experience. What do we need to be able to do that? Well, despite having what was decent net worth, we didn't have access to any decent cash flow. And at that time, I crunched some numbers and said, boy, if we're going to do this, we need some cash flow. So what happened at that point is I'd been introduced, in addition to the other investments we were making in deferred comp, 401k, IRAs, we were paying down the mortgage on our house, which was on a 15-year mortgage. We were on the race to be, debt-free. That was the focus, again, as opposed to being financially free.
Sure. This is such un-GRE-like behavior that you were exhibiting there.
Oh, I know. And looking back on it, it was just kind of what you do. And in retrospect, I'm surprised that I was doing it. I would have thought that I would have done more analysis than that, but that's where we were. And it kind of really came to light when it was like, hey, let's go take this trip. Well, I had no cash flow. So did a little research at that time. We refinanced our primary residence onto a 30-year fixed. I actually lowered my monthly house payment by $600. So right off the bat, there's a $600 advantage there. And my thought was, hey, we can lease this house. we'd get a little positive cash flow off the house. If nothing else, it would, make up for any repairs or any utilities we had to cover or even some vacancies. So refinanced the house, and I found a great duplex here in South Anchorage. I took this big chunk of money out of the house. I put as much down on this property as I possibly could because I wanted $2,000 a month, positive cash flow off this one property. We could lease out our house, maybe get a little bit more. And in my mind, I thought we can travel on $2,000 a month, plus a little savings that we had if we needed that in reserve, and go do this year abroad. The only thing that was holding us back, well, despite the fact that I didn't get the okay from my boss, was cash flow. When I started looking, how can we do this, that I realized that, yeah, we've got a decent net worth, but we have no cash flow. And it's really, everything's kind of all about cash flow. Is it better to be worth $10 million with zero cash flow? Or is it better to be worth $0 and have $20,000 a month cash flow?
Sure, it could very well be the latter. Most people just don't think about it that way.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So you must have had some real epiphanies because earlier, before you listened to Get Rich Education, you were probably more like most people where you're conditioned to think in net worth terms as you're building your wealth over time rather than your cash flow and trying to pay things down and using a 15-year mortgage rather than a 30-year mortgage and all that. And I used to think all of those same things myself. And being in the field that you're in, being a stockbroker, you're just so immersed in what you're doing. Even though you do have this ability to go ahead and crunch numbers, oftentimes there just isn't the motivation for people to do that because they believe the same old thing for so long and they see everyone else doing the same old thing that they think, oh, that's preposterous to think that there would be any other way, to think that it makes more sense to carry debt on a property or to think that it makes sense to uproot your family and fly across the country to get another job to follow money rather than make money follow you. So it's kind of like the Mark Twain quote, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you think you know for sure that just ain't so. That's Mark Twain.
Yeah, that's classic and dead on. Gee whiz. So I've lived it.
Yeah. Well, Eric, I want to take a break and come back, and I want to ask you, a bit about Mid-South home buyers or if you've gone ahead and had experience with any other turnkey providers that we have there at GREturnkey.com. I just want to ask you some questions like, are you offering full asking price with these turnkey providers, or how do you structure your offers to them? And then I want to find out if you've had any problems with any providers. There's usually some bumps along the way, so I want to know about that. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Get Rich Education listener Eric Pratt. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold.
Are you having a hard time finding great investment properties? Unfortunately, the best deals are rarely found locally. Successful investing begins with the right properties in the right markets. Norada Real Estate provides everything you need to invest in the best deals across the U.S. Our simple, proven system will help you create real wealth and passive monthly cash flow. Get your free copy of the ultimate guide to passive real estate investing at noradarealestate.com/guide. That's NORADA realestate.com/guide.
Are you looking to invest in your first investment property or grow your existing inventory? Highlands Residential Mortgage can help, offering down payments as low as 15% and credit score requirements down to 620. Their streamlined process is designed to help investors close their loans quickly and without any surprises. You need someone who knows cash flowing real estate and can help guide you through the muddy waters of today's lending environment. So call Graham Parham today, toll free at 855-326-6802. The Parham team can help you purchase or refinance any of your 1 to 4 family investment properties.
NMLS number 195724, 12001 North Central Expressway, Suite 750, Dallas, Texas 75243. Equal housing lender, not licensed in all states.
Hi, this is Tom Hopkins, and I can't tell you how smart you are to be with Get Rich Education and make these ideas you.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're having an interesting conversation because we're talking with Get Rich Education listener Eric Pratt. And on this show, I have the ability to talk to, really a lot of great guests and thought leaders that are at the top of their field, or best-selling authors, or big business owners. So it's just really great to speak to someone from the listener perspective and find out kind of how it's going for you. And you mentioned Mid-South Home Buyers as a company that you've invested in, that you learned about through Get Rich Education. And I was just thinking, Eric, before the break, I mentioned that Most real estate investors are paid 5 ways at the same time with turnkey real estate investing. That's number 1, appreciation. Number 2, cash flow. Number 3, loan paydown made by a tenant. Number 4, the tax benefits. Fifthly is that inflation hedging benefit. But with Mid-South homebuyers, when you go ahead and tell others about the referral, you're actually getting $1,000 for each property that they close, that your friends close. So you really have a 6th income source there. And boy, I mean, one could figure that into their cash on cash return. They're probably doing even better when they buy in Memphis from Mid-South homebuyers.
Very, very true. And my experience with Mid-South has just been exceptional. I hate to sound too much like a commercial, but geez, when you believe in something, it's hard not to talk about it. And, they do give a referral fee where I would still be talking about them even if I didn't get one. But it sure is nice to get those checks. I got to admit that. And I think I've referred folks to them that now have purchased a total of 4 homes. And I know I've got a couple more that are on the list. And in fact, I look forward to reaching out to those folks and let them know that I have just recently visited Mid-South. And the quality of the homes, the rehabs that they do, and the quality of the people that you're working with is second to none, and I will wholeheartedly continue to tell folks about them. It's been a fantastic experience for me.
Yeah, I've been inside the control room there at Mid-South Homebuyers in Memphis with Terry and Liz, and when you see the efficiency of their systems at work, you begin to get an understanding for why they are so effective, why they can do work at scale, and they do very little advertising because they do such a good job that they get word of mouth referrals. Are there any other providers where you've gone ahead and invested?
I bought a house in Atlanta as well, and I've had it at least 2 years. And, things were just so easy. And with Mid-South that I jumped on that. I researched the Atlanta market a little bit and was quite happy to invest over there. I just recently visited that house as well. And it was everything that I think was promised to me. The quality of the rehab was fine and all of that. If I have a criticism, it is that the management was not in-house. And I found that the third-party management that I used just didn't work very well. And I have since I've had to move on and let them go. And I'm currently managing that property on my own. This tenant that I have is a wonderful person, and she's been great to work with one-on-one. But, gosh, I bought the property hoping that I didn't have to do any more management, especially long distance. I've done that before, and I'd like to be done with it. So going forward, I will only seek out those organizations, those companies, those turnkey providers that do the rehabs, find me a tenant, and then manage that property going forward. I think that is the model that is most advantageous. That's the most wins across the board, and that's who I'm going to work with going forward.
Yeah, having that accountability so that management isn't being outsourced to a third party is so key. And, well, you just gave a great example for why that is. So, yeah, I feel badly that happened. But, well, yeah, it's just a good example of a bump and something that can happen because, you don't do this to be involved yourself and talk to the tenant and field their problems and try to figure out things remotely. So that impacts your return on time invested, and that's what's all important.
Unfortunately, a third-party management company that didn't do a good job kind of tainted the whole experience for me in Atlanta. And unfortunately, it cost the provider down there that had the houses, cost them some business because I would have done another house or 2 with them.
Currently, I believe all of our providers at GREturnkey.com do have that in-house management that's so important. For example, I know that our Texas provider, they made the change a while ago where they had previously been outsourcing to a third-party management company, and now they keep that all in-house. So what about, Eric, for a beginner? I'm just thinking for a beginner that hasn't bought their first property, did you find anything difficult to deal with when you were kind of working with your mortgage loan officer or going through loan qualification or going through a property inspection or going through an appraisal? Any of those steps between getting interested in a property and closing on the property that were difficult?
Keith, nothing really comes to mind. It was pretty darn streamlined. All these that I've bought turnkey. One of the houses I bought in Memphis, I ended up actually paying cash for it just because kind of the way it worked out. I was doing some traveling. There was a lender who I hadn't worked with before who kind of slowed some things down. And I ended up getting a little bit frustrated just with the lender and ended up just paying cash for the property. And it's a Memphis house, so it was one of the least expensive houses I had. I think I paid $61,000 for this house, which surprisingly can be a pretty darn nice house. I was surprised when I went and saw those houses.
Yeah, it can be a surprise in Memphis when you see a $61,000 house and it's newly renovated and it's a single-family home with not a large but a substantial lawn in a decent neighborhood with clean streets and mature landscaping. It just boggles the mind. It's almost like you have to be there in Memphis yourself to see it. Even Google Street View doesn't do it justice, but yeah, okay, so you did pay cash for one of the lower-priced ones. So, yeah, Mid-South home buyers, they kind of deal with the lower-priced homes, certainly not among the higher-priced ones among turnkey markets.
And that house was very good for me. And I mentioned that one and that I paid cash for it because even with paying cash, my cash-on-cash return was very in line with what I was getting on this property here in Anchorage. So the equity that I had in that Anchorage duplex was producing a rate around 9 to 10% cash on cash. And even paying cash for that property in Memphis, that's about the same that I got. And I don't have to manage it. So that feels pretty good. I've got a number of properties. I think I have 6 now in Memphis. I've got the one in Atlanta. I'll probably do some business in Birmingham, which was an area that really surprised me. It's the revitalization in Birmingham has been phenomenal, and had a good meeting with some folks down there that I very much enjoyed. I've been on your show as well. And I'll probably do some business in Birmingham. I'm starting to get to the point, Keith, though, that I have 7 mortgages total, including a duplex I have in Anchorage, my primary residence, a few of the properties in Memphis, and the property in Atlanta all have mortgages. So I'm kind of winding down to, my 10 limit. I know there's ways to get beyond that. I look forward to learning a little bit more about, how I can buy more homes beyond my 10 mortgages, but that number is quickly approaching.
Yep, there are plenty of ways to go beyond your limit of 10, Fannie, Freddie. I mean, for one thing, of course, your wife might be able to get some loans, and that way you could each have 10. But yeah, beyond that, the terms might still work for cash flow if you go beyond your Fannie, Freddie limit, but they're just more challenged. You probably pay a higher interest rate. You'll pay a few points. You might even have to put a higher percent down once you go beyond your 10. But
sure.
I wanted to ask something, Eric. On your turnkey properties that you're purchasing, are you offering the full asking price on those?
Actually, I have been. In working with Mid-South at full price, there's still plenty of room to make a good cash flow. And also, the appraisals on those properties generally come back higher than what they're selling them to me for. The economies of scale that they have in place, by doing these quality rehabs, using folks over and over again to do basically the same rehab on different homes, they can do a quality, near new kind of rehab on these properties cheaper than I could if I was down there either doing it myself or trying to run a crew. So with that in mind, yeah. And Mid-South actually has a bit of a waiting list. There's so many people wanting those properties that when they pop up, I offer full price on the house. I don't even negotiate that because I honestly don't think I can beat that price in that market. I gladly pay it for the product that I get.
And if you're buying multiple properties, the provider probably likes seeing you show up and wants you to get a property if you're going ahead and offering full price and not trying to break them down. So let's just talk a little bit more about numbers overall, Eric. So it sounds like you were doing some investing in real estate already, although you were trying to put the turnkey picture together yourself. So what was your passive monthly income from real estate before you got hooked up with Get Rich Education, and what's your passive monthly income now?
Well, the way it stood just when I became a GRE listener, I had a duplex here in South Anchorage, and I had also purchased one downtown on the Park Strip. But I got to say, you don't buy on the Park Strip as a cash flow. That's a property that I intend to live in. My wife and I may move into that next year when we kind of downsize after my daughter graduates from high school. But at that time, I only had about $1,400 a month passive income coming in, and that was managing both those properties by myself. And I have since sold the property in South Anchorage, and I'm still in the process of putting that money back to work. I still have a little left to go, which should be at least 3 or 4 more homes that I can finance. And I hope that by the time all that money is put to work conservatively, I should be shooting more in the $4,600 a month. it's definitely substantially greater than the $1,400 I had. Even at this point, I'm sitting about $3,600 a month passive on just those properties that I purchased down Turnkey.
Yeah, and that's life-changing income for a lot of people right there. So I guess if you didn't find out about Get Rich Education, and if you did not place your investable dollars into cash flowing income property, and where else do you think that those dollars would have gone, and how do you think that would have looked? I know there's no way to know, but I guess I'm saying if you didn't know about this, what else do you think you would have done, and how would that have looked?
I've tried to crunch those numbers a little bit, but again, that's kind of nebulous. However, I know I would have continued to pay down this property, the house that I'm living in, and I would have continued to maximize my 401k and deferred comp, where I would have had some building wealth in my life deferral plan there, but I wouldn't have any of that passive income. So the numbers get pretty big. And when I think about the deferred comp, the 401k, the IRAs, where I focused putting so much of my money in 20 years, I was going to have $1 million and my pension, because being a police officer, I can have the option of retiring at 20 years. And that was kind of my goal at the time. Well, we hit those benchmarks and I'm coming up on my 20. And now I look at those funds that are still there. At some point, you got to figure out how to turn that into cash flow, because it's the cash flow that matters. It's the cash flow that you live on. So there's still always that problem. Even once you have a decent net worth, it only matters, what that cash flow is, what you can do with it. So I feel very fortunate to have these other streams of income. I love this passive, this mailbox money, that money just shows up. It's a beautiful thing. Those numbers get bigger. It's money you can spend today. Although I find that the more of it that comes in, the more of it that I want to come in. Researching these markets, I truly enjoy learning about other ways to make passive income. So clearly, I listen to Get Rich Education. I get some real satisfaction and some joy out of doing that. So the passive income that I have coming in, we've been using to utilize or generate more passive income at this point.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're a researcher to some extent, and it's smart to be a researcher, because Matt Bowles was on the show with me one time, and we were talking about how compelling the term turnkey is, and everyone thinks, everything's just going to be handled and everything's just going to be perfect forever because I bought a turnkey property. No, not necessarily. You need to be a researcher, and you need to go verify and confirm things yourself. But start with that turnkey provider that presents something that's all done for you, but then take it upon yourself to do your due diligence and go ahead and confirm some of those things. Yeah, I love how you bring up the tax deferral plan versus the life deferral plan. Most people invest in 401ks, 403bs, 457s, and IRAs for the tax reason. But boy, life is about a lot more than taxes. Investing is about a lot more than taxes. There are so many things that are more important. What's your rate of return? That's the thing that gets taxed. So how big is that pie before we talk about the chunk that we're going to take out of it? So a lot of people wouldn't even undertake investing in a quote-unquote retirement plan at all if it weren't for the tax treatment, but that's not a reason enough alone. It just goes back to the whole don't let the tax tail wag the dog thing, and let's look at the big picture and, what result are you going to get in your life? And for you, it's substantial cash flow in the thousands now. That's enough to change some people's lives.
Absolutely. And it's kind of some peace of mind. Even though I am kind of one of the lucky few, if you will, that actually has a pension, because that doesn't exist for a lot of people anymore. Even those people in my industry that have been hired on in the last 10 years, they don't have a defined benefit plan. That's just a thing of the past. But even with that said, I have that, but I don't want all my eggs in that basket. I want other sources of income. I want money coming from other places, so that when if there were a catastrophic event, something that prompted the payment of my pension to go away, I need another source of income. I need something else coming in. And so I love having the passive income from real estate. It definitely gives me some peace of mind there. And it makes so much sense. And I've made forays into that real estate investing a couple times in the past, but knowing that that's kind of where I wanted to be, I needed to do some more of that. And now with the advent of Turnkey, if you will, I'm glad I found the podcast. It's made a difference in my life, certainly down to the real hard numbers. And it's beyond that, Keith, and not to blow too much sunshine up your skirt there, Keith, but all the mindset stuff that you present on GRE. It's, the abundant mindset and just thinking about other ways to make this passive income and focusing on the value of your time invested. There's a lot more to life than just trying to make a bunch of money. But, when you have sources of income coming in, it sure frees you up to do what you want to do and take care of those people you want to take care of and do good things.
Yeah, and do good in the world and in creating that responsible housing for others. Yeah, it really does come down to mindset and pulling back and taking that big view. Mindset, that is kind of answering the why question instead of answering the how question. I think a lot of people in life probably spend too much time dealing with the how and not enough time dealing with the why, and it really comes back to doing the right thing is more important than doing things right. That's kind of answering your why and answering the mindset. So we've been talking about your income stream, and I've really got to congratulate you for being an action taker and already creating $3,600 a month of passive income from real estate. Real wealth comes from both a number of income streams, and it comes from those income streams being durable. So I just really want to ask to you, from your perspective, with what you've done in buying properties, 6 in Memphis, 1 in Atlanta, and probably 1 upcoming in Birmingham here, how durable do your income streams feel to you? How does that feel?
Very good, especially more so now that I've been on the ground in all those locations. And you talk about on GRE about the market. And I've spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different markets. And, Memphis, it's a growing economy, lots of good things going on there. Lots of people like to rent there. And, there's industry there that can't go away. So I really like having that exposure in Memphis. Not to mention, I made a trip down there and got to spend a couple days in Memphis, and I really had a good time. The same can be true with Birmingham. I'm kind of excited about that market. The fact that there's a whole lot of direct foreign investment going into Alabama, and the revitalization that has taken place in Birmingham and continues to happen really blew my mind. I was actually in Birmingham back in 1993, and I swear I'd never go back there. In my memory, all the downtown was boarded up, and it felt like I was driving around and I couldn't find a decent part of town. And this trip, what a great place. The downtown is revitalizing. There's lots of, exciting things going on. There's multi-hundred of millions of dollars, these projects that are 2 years from completion, although they already have 100% signed leases for the commercial space downtown. So there's good things happening there. It's become quite the foodie destination. We had one of the single best meals I've ever had in my life. I think we'll definitely be doing some business down there. Those investments, they feel very secure. They're real, and people need places to live. And those are growing economies down there.
Yeah, you said an interesting thing about Birmingham. You were there in 1993, and with your experience there, you swore you'd never go back. And Birmingham, being the number 1 for per capita foreign direct investment in the United States, it's just not one of those things you think about. And people tend to stereotype things. So it's a good thing that you're seeing through that and you're seeing bigger than that. 25 years nearly have gone by since you were last in Birmingham. Just to make an analogy to just say a long ago U.S. historical event, say being in Richmond, Virginia in 1865, how would you like to be there? Well, it sounds pretty threatening. It sounds like you're in the middle of the Civil War. Well, just take that up 25 years later to the year 1890. People are like, what war? That was like one generation ago, and that's 25 years right there itself. So places change substantially over time, and that's just one example, but people tend to forget that, and it sounds like you're informed.
I'm excited enough about this stuff, and it's had enough of an impact on my life that I like talking to people about it. I'm not trying to sell them on anything, but the ripple effects are real. I like trying to do good for people. And if I can tell them what's worked for me and pass it along, that's fantastic. And in fact, I would offer that up for any of your other listeners that want to reach out or want to have a conversation with me or ask a question. My email address it's pratts, PRATTS, at ak.net. So pratts at ak.net. I'd be more than happy to answer any simple questions they have and offer any insight that I can. But I'm certainly no guru. I'm learning as I go along. But the podcast has made a definite difference in my life. So little things can have big effects over time. And it's definitely done that.
A small hinge opens up a big door for sure. Well, thank you so much for leaving your email address for our listeners so they can just ask you about your experience, because you're further down the road than some of our listeners are, and maybe not as far down the road as some others. So it'll be really interesting for them to get your perspective and your feedback and what's worked for you and what hasn't.
Thank you, Keith, for having me on your show. I'm honored to get to talk to you and kind of put my name on those people that had a segment on your show, and that's some pretty rarefied air out there, Keith. So it's an honor to be in that fraternity.
Well, I'll be sure to leave your email address in the show notes for the listeners. Eric Pratt, I would say that you are one person that has not quit your daydream.
Thank you, Keith.
Well, I look forward to taking you and your wife out to lunch and actually meeting in person. Eric Pratt, thanks so much for coming on to Get Rich Education.
Thank you, Keith.
Terrific. Special thanks today to Get Rich Education listener Eric Pratt. I don't know that he's any sort of professional speaker, and he came on and did great today. And how cool that he left his personal email address for you. And yeah, that's in the show notes, and he sounds pretty receptive to fielding your inquiries. Very kind of Eric. I'd like to hear your story here on the show. Even if you've only invested in real estate a year or two, you're welcome to send us a few sentences through our contact page on our website if you want to appear on the show. And please understand that from there, we can only pick a few of the loads of submissions I would expect, picking a story that would help the most people. And I've got another way, a different way that I'd like to get to know you. Let's meet in person at an event. I just committed to attend another industry event. If you want to attend an event for your own learning and networking, we could also meet. Although I'm a teacher, it's important for a teacher to be a student too. That's continuing education. So none of these events are ones that I'm sponsoring. I'm merely attending them just like you. And it's a great way for you to reach out and say hi so we can get to know each other just like I've had listeners do at some past events I've attended. And shortly, I will email out a list of events to you that I'll be attending. To find out how we can meet, just be sure you're subscribed to our newsletter. I think you know that you can do that at getricheducation.com, and you'll get that email from me. And of course, we never have, nor would we sell your email address to anyone else. I'm in control of that. I've made sure it's never happened. And you have to want to get our free emails and newsletter. You'll subscribe at getricheducation.com and then be sent an email to confirm that you do indeed want the newsletter before you're subscribed. I only want people to get it that want it. That's right there on the homepage at getricheducation.com. Special thanks today to GRE listener and action taker Eric Pratt. Wonderful job. And don't you appreciate how open Eric was for your benefit? Quite kind. I'll be back with you right here next week to help you build your wealth. Until then, though you might quit your day job, don't quit your daydream.
You've been listening to Get Rich Education, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
Cash flow real estate investors nationwide and worldwide, this is Get Rich Education's Keith Weinhold. Forbes has rated Memphis, Tennessee as the #1 cash flowing market in the world. Our good friends at Mid-South Homebuyers have been Memphis's premier turnkey real estate provider for 14 years with a stellar reputation and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Owner Terry Kerr was born and raised in Memphis. Yeah, he knows the market and has renovated and sold over 1,000 houses in the Memphis area. Find out what their many repeat buyers already know. Their houses are completely renovated, even come with a 1-year builder's warranty and a lifelong rental guarantee. They're a perfect fit for the first-time out-of-state investor or the seasoned investor diversifying their portfolio. Mid-South Homebuyers friendly staff makes investing easy. Learn more at midsouthhomebuyers.com or give them a call at 901-217-HOME. The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.